on Twitter.
Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ on the story today. Oklahoma, Texas gaining momentum to leave Big 12 and join the SEC early in 2024. When the news came down in the summer of 2021, I mean, we didn't know when it was going to happen. Maybe immediately, and they were hoping maybe the Big 12 would fold. It did not. Brett McMurphy now joins us. And, Brett, there's always been wonder, are they really going to fulfill their entire obligations to the Big 12? Thanks for your time. When did this, pop up again? What are you hearing when it comes to the possibility of leaving a year early?
Well, this is basically ebbed and flowed ever since OU and Texas announced they were going to the SEC. And I think the immediate reaction was, they're going to leave early. There's no way they're going to stay the whole time. And then kind of everybody pumped the brakes on that. And then it got to the point where they're like, look, this can't get done. They're going to have to stick the whole time. And, OU and Texas have always said they will remain in the league until the grant of rights are up, which is 2025. But then I'd say in the past few months, things have changed. All of the parties involved are eager for this to happen. It takes a lot for this to happen, though. There's a lot of players in this. Oklahoma, Texas, the Big 12, ESPN, Fox to some extent. And basically it boils down to, can they all reach a decision where the Big 12 doesn't feel like they're getting less money than they would have received if OU and Texas stayed till 2025. The SEC is kind of a bystander in this. They'll take OU or Texas in 2024 if they can, or they'll wait till 2025. They're not really involved in the negotiations, so they don't have any input. But then the tricky thing for ESPN is if there is a reduction in value of the Big 12's media rights in the final year of their current deal. I'm not talking about the new one they just signed, but the current one with OU and Texas leaving. Is ESPN willing to offset those losses somehow? And also keep in mind, ESPN is going to have to pay the SEC more money when OU and Texas join the league. That's not a surprise. But would they rather wait until 2025 to pay that extra money to the SEC? Or are they okay with paying it early in 2024? So it's not like one simple decision. It's 3 or 4 decisions that kind of all are kind of interlinked together. And that ultimately will decide if it happens. The good news is, like I said, everybody wants it to happen. But bottom line is, no surprise, money's going to be the determining factor if this gets done or not.
How would this have other dominoes that would affect the other leagues? Would it affect how you talk about the playoff, the 12-team playoff in 2024, if you've got 2 16-team leagues in it? And does it make the Big 12 and Pac-12 more aggressive in getting to a certain level of teams going into that 12-team playoff, maybe even if it's just in earnest in 2026 when it kicks off in whatever format it's going to be?
Yeah, I don't really see it impacting the 2024 playoff. I don't think if this happens, then the Big 12 is automatically like, well, we need to ramp up our expansion plans. Or the Pac-12 is like, well, we need to ramp up our expansion plans. I mean, this was going to happen anyway. It's only going 1 year earlier. I know a lot of people have suggested, well, why in the world would Texas and OU want to get to the SEC a year early? Because they're going to have a tougher, more bodies to climb over to get to the college football playoff. And I understand that. But, by the way, when you go to the SEC, you're going to make more money. Why does USC and UCLA want to get in the Big Ten in 2024 and not wait a few years after that? Well, you're going to make, in USC and UCLA's case, you're going to make 3 times more in your media rights deal than by staying in the Pac-12. So, that's kind of the breakdown of that. But as far as specific consequences or maybe people doing things based on this happening a year early, I really don't think it'll have any impact.
Yeah, the ESPN will have to pay the Big 12 something, but don't they also have to scratch an itch for Fox? And would the expanded playoff give them more inventory to negotiate giving some of those pieces to the puzzle to Fox?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's not like one simple solution. There's a number of, they can get creative in this. And if everybody wants to do it, then they can get creative on how they do this. One way that I reported today was, the exit fee for OU in Texas is $84 million. Well, several sources I talked to said, keep in mind, whenever a team leaves the league, they usually only get about 60. They only are required to pay about 60% of that number. And I've asked people, why in the world would you let a team out of your conference for 60% when they're supposed to pay this other amount? And they said, well, simply, if that school wants to take it to court or challenge it or whatever, then the open Pandora's box. Well, what if they actually win? What if it's ruled, they just toss it out and then they get out for scot-free. So it's kind of like an understanding. Our contract says this number, but we're willing to take 60%. So if OU and Texas would get that number, which would be about $50 million, and you're talking about ESPN would compensate the Big 12, what if OU and Texas say, okay, look, we negotiated this 60% number. It's about $50 million, but we'll give you an additional $10 million or $15 million or $20 million, whatever this number is, to let us out early in 2024. That's another possibility too. So, again, there's a number of different possibilities and a number of solutions, and you could get creative. Fox is they're not going to be really involved because they're going to have the inventory either way, but it just gets tricky with ESPN, potentially having to pay more to the Big 12 and then having to pay more earlier to the SEC. But maybe OU and Texas offsets that by, look, they pay an extra $10 million to the Big 12, and then they're going to make that up as soon as they go to the SEC. Again, it's complicated, but the good news is, everyone involved wants to see if they can make this work, as long as, big surprise here, nobody loses any money.
In your opening line of your story today, Brett McMurphy, again, Action Network HQ with us on 365 Sports. Growing sentiment and momentum. Is that like something that developed while you were in Vegas? If you covered all that stuff in Vegas, is that what do you mean growing sentiment? Is that just it's kind of become now more front and center?
Yeah, it really has. And it's funny. Another reporter reached out and was like, "Oh, I heard the same thing in Vegas. I should have pursued it more." And I told him, I said, "Well, I don't mean to be a jerk, but I've actually heard this for like the past 2 or 3 weeks. I just wanted to get more sources on it and make sure it was rock solid before I wrote it. I hate when people just speculate on stuff and report stuff that can't happen. Now, I'm not saying this means it's 100%, but it was strong enough. So no, it wasn't like I just heard about it in Vegas and like, oh, let's throw this story up. This is something that I'd been, reporting on my own and working on for the past 2 or 3 weeks. And again, momentum, growing sentiment, it's because all parties involved want this to happen. Like if there's Big 12, OU, Texas, ESPN, Fox to some extent, the SEC. If half of those groups didn't want it to happen, I wouldn't have reported it. But everybody wants it to happen. That's great. We wanted a 12-team playoff, and look at all the hoops we had to jump through to get that done. So doesn't mean it will get done, but at least everyone's, willing to kind of try to come to a solution to get this thing done. And obviously the SEC wants it to happen. They don't have any say in this. They'll take OU and Texas when they come, but certainly they want to have a 16-team league like the Big Ten in 2024 when the playoff expands.
Yeah, Brett, we had Mac Rhodes on, we have him on every week, but it was probably about a month ago when asked about what the relations are between the other two teams. And, and his sentiment was the Big 12 feels like, look, the decision's been made. Everybody's fine with Texas OU with where they are right now. But whenever that happens, it happens. And 2 years from now, fine. Nobody's holding guns to anybody's head. Everything is amicable. It's just everybody would like to just know what the answer is at the end of this maze.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this analogy, and if you like this analogy, then I thought of it. If you don't like it, then I heard it from somebody else. But it's kind of like saying, you know what, honey, we're going to get a divorce. Okay, great. Yeah, in 3 years, we're going to get a divorce. So what are those 3 years going to be like, leading up to that? It's like, cut the cord and let's move on. So if you like that, it's 100%. I just thought of that.
I think that's not a bad idea. And by the way, the teams that are remaining and those who are incoming, as long as they get a check, I think they're ready to move on too, whether it's at the end of 2023 or 2024. One note, Bob Thompson, a Fox Sports executive back in the day, Bob, he mentioned ESPN could save or would save approximately $30 million by shutting down the Longhorn Network and Sooner Vision early. And some of that money, if it's freed up, again, this is a text to me a minute before the show, some of that money could possibly line pockets, and just as he's kind of estimating the value between those two.
Absolutely. And that gets back to, and I didn't, Bob's obviously he's a lot smarter with all these networks and conference dealings than I am. And, again, that's why I reported this. The momentum and the growing sentiment is, if you've got everybody working towards the same goal, then you can come up with these creative solutions like Bob mentioned, where, if there is no Longhorn Network and all these things roll into the tier 3 rights and all these different things, or you can kind of move money from Peter to pay Paul and all that, then yeah, you can come up for a way to do this. But if everyone doesn't want it to happen, it doesn't matter how creative you are, because somebody will simply say, look, we don't want this to happen. Everybody wants it to happen. And so I think, like Bob mentioned, there's a lot of different ways that you can get to this end goal, again, as long as everybody's okay with the final result. But it's obvious everybody prefers, no pun intended, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a great way to end it, Brett. That's fantastic. Again, great job with it. Your thoughts about Mike Leach, and do you have any favorite Mike Leach story?
Man, is this a 10-hour show? And I'll get started. Look, I think, and a lot of people have pointed this out. I'm an Oklahoma State guy, so, been in the Big 12. It's been at the forefront for me for a long time. And I think people, maybe they're recognizing this now, just how much reach he has had and how much influence in college football he has had. And it's just incredible. You look at his, laundry list of guys that worked under him and been influenced by him. I think the best thing about Mike is that he treated everybody like you were his best friend. And I've seen, former college reporters tweet out that, they were contacting several coaches for a story several years ago, and only one coach responded. It was Mike Leach, who called the kid back after midnight to do an interview. And I guess one of my favorite quotes of his was when he was at Washington State, and I tweeted this out earlier today. He was at Washington State. They beat USC. And you get you get the cliched, coach, what does this mean to your school? And, Leach doesn't go into how important the win was or what it means. He simply says, hey, this is just like Woodstock, except everybody's not naked. I mean, that sums him up perfectly.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We played that clip, in fact, right before the segment with you. Brett, thanks for jumping on with us today. We appreciate you very much. We'll stay in touch and appreciate your time.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ, on the story. The headline, Oklahoma, Texas, gaining momentum to lead Big 12, join SEC early in 2024. When